Hey guys, today we're going to take a look at building the Propeller Platform. It's an open source hardware platform, not like the Arduino, except that it uses a propeller, which is an 8-core, 80 megahertz microcontroller from Parallax. Flip on your soldering iron and let it warm up, and while it's warming up, check to make sure you have all the parts you're going to need. Take a look at the video notes and you can download a bill of materials that has all of the parts and where to get them. The only thing that's special here is the Propeller Platform PCB. You can pick that up at www.gadgetgangster.com, or you can just download the design files and make the board yourself. I'm going to start by putting in some of the discrete components, and I'm going to put several of them in the board at the same time. Flip the board over and then splay the leads out. And then once I've put several in, I'll go back with the soldering iron and solder them in. So I've already put in these resistors, these capacitors. These are the 47 microfarad capacitors. This little ceramic capacitor here, and this pull-up resistor right here. I'll flip it over, pull out the old soldering iron, and grab some solder. Now I've just heated this up. We'll make sure that it's hot by touching a little bit of solder there, and making sure that it melts easily and smokes. And we'll solder these in. So with all the pieces in here, I need to trim the excess leads. I'm going to take the dikes, just trim them down like this. Now most of the discretes are in here. I'm just going to finish it up by putting in the remainder. 3 LEDs there, this tantalum cap, the 40 pin and 8 pin sockets for the prop and EEPROM, and the reset switch. We'll flip it over, splay out the leads, and solder them down. So what I'm going to do here is insert a couple of the short lead parts like this switch here. And the way I'm going to do it is by dropping it in and holding it in with my finger. Then I flip the board over and I kind of take a little bit of solder, just kind of dangle it on my board like that, and heat it up just enough to lock one pin down. Then I check to see if I like the alignment. If I don't like the alignment, I just heat that one pin with the soldering iron and move it around with my finger. And once I'm happy with it, I'll solder down the other 2 pins. You do that with this switch here. You also do it with the power jack as well. And you're going to do it with this 4-pin connector for the prop plug. Next, I'm going to add the voltage regulators. There are 2 regulators, a 3 volt and a 5 volt. Take the regulators and bend the leads like this at 90-degree angle, and then insert them into the holes. This is where the 5 volt regulator goes. Drop it in like that, and then do the same thing with the 3 volt regulator. Use a bit of solder and solder the tab to the board. That's going to allow the regulator to dissipate more heat. And then flip it over and solder the pins down to the holes. Do the same thing with the 3 volt regulator, and that's it for the regulators. Okay, I've gone ahead and added the power regulators right there and there. That's the 5 volt and that's the 3 volt. Before we continue, let's check to make sure that the power is working correctly. The power stage at this point is completed. So the way to do that is to plug the power adapter in and turn the switch from off to on. And these lights should light up correctly. If you have any problems, check to make sure that everything's soldered correctly. Use your voltage regulator, if you have one as well, to test for continuity. We have a few parts left. We have these pin sockets, which are going to go on the edge of the board. We have a propeller and an EEPROM. We have a 5 megahertz crystal, and we have these 2 machine pins. These 2 machine pins are going to work as a socket for the crystal, and this is going to let you solder the crystal safely and change the crystal if you want to use a different frequency crystal, 6 megahertz or 4 megahertz or whatever you want to use. Now the way to turn these into a crystal socket is to split them in half. You can use your dikes to do that. And then use your dikes to scrape off the excess plastic. That's a pretty quick operation. You're going to get 2 little pins. And then what you do, you just take the pins and you drop them right there on the board. It's the only hole that will fit them. And that's where your crystal is going to go. Now if you flip your board over at this point, they're going to fall right out. So what you do is you take a little bit of tape. I have just a little white label here. You just stick it over gently like this, just to hold them down while you're soldering them. You don't want to use plastic tape because the plastic's going to melt. Just use paper tape. That'll work fine. I also usually use Post-it note. Post-it note works great. I flip it over, grab my solder, solder them in. Now that they're soldered in, I just trim off the excess right there. Those little pin tops. And there you go. With the pin sockets set in their place to hold the crystal, I'm going to take the crystal and trim all but just a little bit of the lead. Maybe 4 or 5 millimeters. Just a little nub there. And I can drop those straight into the socket. The last soldering step is to add these pin sockets to the outside of the board. Now, the way the propeller platform is designed, the outside row and the inside row are connected, so it doesn't matter which row you add it to. I find it easiest to add it to the outside. So I'm going to drop these in and use the same technique I did before of holding it down, soldering one pin, setting my alignment to make sure it's the way I like it, and then soldering the rest of them. So we'll do that for this, the 4 over here, the 4 over here, and the long strip over there too. Last step, let's put the propeller into its socket right here. And you just give it a little push so that it snaps in. Sometimes you have to fold the leads in a little bit. And then you put the prom right here. So that's pretty much the construction process. You can find out more, download the layout, get the bill of materials, or even pick up a kit at www.gadgetgangster.com. Thanks for watching.